there are all different kinds of plants and parts of plants that have more or less application for health and wellness. The same applies in the fungal community. And so when you hear broad statements such as it has to be an extract or it has no value, that's a vast oversimplification. When you think of the thousands of different mushrooms, really millions, a much larger kingdom than the botanical kingdom, and the fact that there are unique compounds in these different parts of the mushroom life cycle and in each of the different species. So that's the learning that we should all be striving to really understand. So we have formed a collective, a collaborative of the mushroom growers and the mycologists in our community. So we are all meeting and contributing to that knowledge and ongoing awareness.
Welcome to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for people like you who care about the social impact of conscious companies and everyday heroes. Hear inspiring stories from those who put people and planet before profit and personal gain. You'll learn how you can make a difference, vote with your dollars, and get involved today. Here's your host, Corinna Bellizzi.
Hello, fellow do-gooders and friends. I'm your host, Corinna Bellizzi. Today, we're going to dive into what I call the weird and wonderful world of mushrooms and their role in doing things that are really critically important for life on Earth, including restoring ecosystems, assisting in the traffic of water and nutrients between plants and to plants, and ultimately also supporting climate health by increasing the ability of our soil to sequester carbon, as well as their incredible role in impacting health of humans and animals. I even give my dogs mushrooms to support their longevity. So to explore this topic, I'm joined today by Dr. Sandra Carter. She has an extensive background in the areas of sports performance, disease prevention, and health promotion through diet, exercise, and integrative medicine. Dr. Carter has applied her medical background to product development and whole foods mushroom formulations to create efficacious ingredients and finished products that you might already know. She is the founder of M2 Ingredients and the popular mushroom brand, Om Mushroom Superfood. Dr. Carter, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me today. Very excited to have a little time to talk about health and wellness.
Yeah, so I thought we would start with just learning a little bit about what inspired you first to really dive into this weird and wonderful world of mushrooms.
Yeah, I get asked that a lot. How did you segue from your background really in integrative medicine to now being 100% in the mushroom world? And, with so much experience in health and wellness, my approach has always been on integrative medicine. So looking at nutrition as being absolutely key. So I was aware of mushrooms and their benefits, but it really happened when I was at a Scripps Integrative Medicine conference and a colleague of mine introduced me to Steve Farrar, my co-founder, who's a mycologist. And Steve at the time had just segued into growing functional mushrooms, the different types of mushrooms that we look to for more unique benefits. And he was looking at possibilities, I'll say, for formulating products. So initially, I said, sure, I'll lend a hand and I'd like to learn more about these different species you're growing. And as I dove more and more into the research, I became really, really just amazed at how diverse the fungal kingdom is. And really how limited the awareness, the education is in the Western culture. And so I could see there was a real opportunity to help educate and importantly, to innovate new products.
So let's talk about the role of mushrooms and really what makes them so special. We can start with a perspective on soil health, as our audience is already a bit familiar with concepts of regenerative agriculture if they've been following along for a while. I just think it's so fascinating and will really help the end user that might even be interested in mushrooms understand what makes them so different as far as consumables in our daily lives.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, the DNA in the fungal kingdom is much more similar to the DNA in the animal or in the mammal kingdom than is botanical DNA. So the botanical kingdom split off about 9 million years prior to the fungal kingdom splitting off from the animal kingdom. And so there is a tremendous amount of similarity between the mushroom kingdom and the animal kingdom. And so we find compounds like L-ergothioneine. It's a very unique antioxidant that you can only find really in the fungal kingdom, in lichen. You can find it in plants, but only if that plant had a mycorrhizal relationship with the fungal kingdom, meaning there was mycelium in the soil that allowed for the take-up of that antioxidant. But what's so fascinating is it's the only antioxidant that's been identified that all mammals have an active transport mechanism for that specific antioxidant. And what we have found in research is the levels of this important, very stable antioxidant are less than 50% than they were in the 1950s. And that relates to our agricultural practices where there aren't any mycorrhizal relationships in much of our modern agriculture anymore. So the mushrooms play such a key role in how they transport nutrients across our forests, in our agricultural soils, how they battle with the viruses and bacteria, and ultimately how they have developed a very strong and unique immune function to be able to live very long periods of time. So many mycelial fields can last for hundreds of years, for instance, and last for hundreds of years and be spread out over hundreds of acres.
So this leans into the conversations we've had prior about reasons that you might not want to till your soil because you're essentially breaking that mycelium network, the honeycomb that kind of exists within the soil and holds it together, helps it retain more moisture so that plants are more drought tolerant and actually require less water to grow. We covered this as well when I connected with Carol Levine and Ken Lee on the other podcast I host, Nutrition Without Compromise. We did share that episode as a bonus episode on Care More Be Better, but they talked about something as simple as getting more crop per drop through mitigation of how you're actually managing your growth, and that you might not even need to use flood agriculture to grow rice. So, I mean, even these simple things that we've learned with time, some of which are more novel or new, and some of which have been around for what seems like since the dawn of civilization, like the use of mushrooms in traditional Chinese medicine.
I also want to just mention that how we manage our forests really relates to that fungal network. And it's now been identified that these mother trees who have if you saw Avatar and they talk about the tree of life and how they communicate, that's real on our planet. Those mother trees through the mycelial network have an ability to shunt nutrients to the saplings around them. And so when you clear cut a forest, you eliminate those mother trees, you reduce that fungal network and thereby the health of the overall forest.
Yeah. I mean, that is so true. And it's really nice to hear you reflect on that as well, because while we have so much wisdom that may be buried in ancient culture with the use of mushrooms for generations, even just understanding that when a tree dies in the forest, what happens? They get covered in mushrooms, right?
Mm-hmm. So they play a very key role. And I think people maybe aren't aware of it's such a key role. It's a vital role, right? We need the fungal enzymes. So mushrooms, we have enzymes inside our stomachs. Mushrooms produce enzymes outside of their cell wall. So that's how they digest a tree in the forest, right? They decompose organic matter so that plant life can take it up in individual constituents. So it's absolutely vital for our planet.
So as we continue this conversation, you obviously have been you're growing mushrooms in an organic way for some time now. The Ohm mushroom superfood products have been on the market for some time. I think you've even gone through a packaging iteration or two by this point. I think I've seen an earlier iteration and now a newer one. So, what have you learned and what sustainable practices have you brought in to how you're growing mushrooms to maximize their potential human benefit or human and animal benefit, I should say?
Well, I've learned a lot, and which I love. Yeah, I'm a life learner, and so I know that mushrooms are bioaccumulators, and so they will accumulate whatever is in the air, whatever they're growing on, the water that they're utilizing. They will take up and accumulate items that are in their surroundings, and so it is so extremely important that you grow mushrooms in a very pristine and careful manner. And so we supply mushrooms literally all over the planet to different companies. And it was interesting. We supply South Korea, and the South Korean FDA has mandated that all mushrooms coming into Korea has to be tested for radiation. And the reason is this: wild-crafted chaga in that part of the world is often grown downwind of Chernobyl. And it is a very, very slow growing mushroom. It can grow for over 7 years. And during that time, it has an opportunity to consolidate and accumulate radiation from the air. And so now they've realized that much of this wild crafted chaga has very high levels of radiation. Likewise, if you're growing mushrooms in a polluted area, it can consolidate heavy metals and pesticides and fungicides and so on. So we are growing our mushrooms, first of all, on an organic substrate. We grow them on organic gluten-free oats, and we grow them in a controlled growing environment, meaning it's got filtered water. The air is filtered for any contaminants. So we are able to control not only the environment in terms of any potential pollutants, we also can optimize the growing conditions. So many of the mushrooms that we grow are kind of what we would consider tropical. They like warm weather environments, but many of them also like cold environments, and some like it warm and then they like it cold and then they like it warm again. So we can modulate for each species the environment for that mushroom and therefore really optimize those compounds that will contribute to your overall health and wellness. So looking at things like beta-glucans or cordycepin and cordyceps, for instance.
So some of the mushrooms you're growing are obviously a little tougher to grow, whereas some of those that you might get to grow in your home, like the back to the roots, they sell these kits where you can grow on their substrate oyster mushrooms. I've grown the golden, the gray-ish. I think they might call it something else, and like a tan version, I think. And I've personally tried this, and sometimes I have like a box that just seems to go off and produces a ton of mushrooms, and other times it seems to have a harder time getting going. And I imagine this is in part due to season in my home, temperature in my home, how dry it is, how moist it is, how often I'm spraying it down. What makes it hard to grow mushrooms? What makes this a science as opposed to just, a kitchen experiment?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You can grow your own mushrooms, and I'm so happy to see the popularity of these wonderful kits, so people can have their own mushroom garden in their home. Yeah, environment plays a really key role. Lion's mane is a mushroom, for instance, that like much cooler environments. They also like a lot of oxygen, and that for most people growing in a home environment isn't an issue. When you're growing in a very commercial environment, it's extremely important because they are producing a lot of carbon dioxide. And so you have to make sure you're removing that from your growing spaces. So making sure that they have the right, not only temperature, but also there's potential for contamination, right? So you've got a sterile whatever it is you're growing on. And then you could have invading bacteria or invading fungal species coming in, and they could retard the growth of your mushrooms. So you want to have a more pristine opportunity for your mushrooms to grow in.
Yeah, I think I read on the Back to the Roots packaging, they wanted me to ideally, it would grow, I think, a little slower, but produce more fruiting bodies if it was grown in my cupboard. And then if I wanted bigger mushrooms, I'd grow it outside on my counter in, indirect light, so to speak. But one of the amazing things about mushrooms too is that when you do put them out in UV light, if you happen to be growing them at home, they will actually improve their levels of vitamin D. So if you're not spending a ton of time in the sun, you can even do this with store-bought mushrooms like cremini or whatever, button mushrooms. You essentially just put them out in the sun for a half hour before you slice and dice them, cook them or whatever. And then the vitamin D that they provide could be similar to taking 1,000 IU of a vitamin D supplement, which is kind of amazing. It goes to showcase how unique and different this part of the animal, plant, fungus kingdom really is. And another way, almost has an attribute that's similar to ours, where if we spend time in the sun, we can build vitamin D.
Yeah, they convert agosterol into vitamin D. We have our melanin in our skin. Again, really a very similar kind of process. And you're absolutely right. Those mushrooms, even you bought them from the store, they still can have that conversion occur. And so you see now more and more culinary mushrooms being labeled with high levels of vitamin D because in those growing facilities, they have lighting that helps with that conversion. But if you have some that don't have that label on it, you can achieve the same goal at home.
Yeah, amazing. So I just, as I got my start working in this industry, I first worked for a traditional Chinese oriented company for Draco Natural Products. They produce herbal extracts, right? And also mushroom extracts. So the first mushrooms I was exposed to were things like cordyceps, which people have now heard of because they watched a certain TV show where the
Yes, The
cordyceps
Last of Us.
mushroom,
Yeah.
The Last of Us,
Yep.
it's like the mushrooms are taking
Yep.
over and making people zombies. I mean, that is not
Yep.
how this particular strain of mushroom works. It tends to stick on the insect world, but you grow this then on a medium, and typically that medium would be a rice or a grain of some sort. You said you're using organic oats. Is that correct?
Yes, and our cordyceps loves those oats.
So cordyceps, as it compares to a cordyceps that's wild crafted, because you're growing it in this way, how different is it? And does it retain the same sort of medicinal properties that the first used from that wild crafted space might?
Yeah, that's a great question and one that we really have been focusing on. And so we have really developed our science team. We have a chief science officer, Julie Dao, who has a PhD in natural product chemistry. We've developed now, we have 5 mycologists and another PhD researcher on board. So we're looking at the metabolomics of these different species. So looking at cordyceps as an example, and what are the cordycepin levels and where are we finding the cordyceps in the fruit body stage, in the mycelial stage, and then how does that relate or compare to wild crafted material as well. And what's really amazing is in many of the products, cordyceps is a good example, what we are cultivating in a commercial manner is really quite equivalent to wild crafted. There may be some cordycepin that you're finding in the high Tibetan plateau that are growing on a caterpillar that honestly will have higher levels, but the price tag and talk about not as sustainable. This is a very kind of sad story because there's been interest in that. The Tibetan people, it's now a little bit of a cultural issue because of the high demand and high cost of that material has had an impact on that culture. We are finding, for instance, we did a major metabolomics and cell line study of our lion's mane mushroom, and we found unique nootropic compounds in the mycelium that is different than the fruit body stage of the mushroom. So in those kinds of instances, it's actually better to have this sort of full spectrum, whole life cycle mushroom. The traditional Chinese medicine folks at the time had no way to capture they didn't have the sterile processes. They had no way to capture that mycelial stage of the mushroom. And so as we dive deeper and deeper into the science, we're really learning more about the importance of the different parts of the life cycle and how we can grow them to optimize the compounds.
I think that's just incredible. One of the things that I've seen in this natural products industry over the 25 years that I've been working in it too is that sometimes we're actually able to best what nature does or really work to help the plant along, or in this case, the mushroom, so that it can thrive in a different way. And sometimes in those cases, you're able to get more out of that mushroom or the mycelium. I know that as knowledge continues to be gained with time, we've shifted our thinking on parts of the mushroom that are most valuable. In some cases, in some mushrooms, it seems to be more the mycelial network, whereas in others, it's more focused on fruiting body. And it's a lot, and the fruiting body being like the part of the mushroom that you traditionally associate. That's the mushroom, so to speak. This can be very confusing for people. So, where do they go? What resources do you recommend for their continued knowledge if they're a budding mycologist, so to speak, and they really just want to learn more and are even potentially interested in harvesting some of their own responsibly when they come across it in the wilds?
Well, fortunately, the mycology world is really growing there, and there's a lot of fabulous books that are now being written and articles that you're seeing with individuals who have, I would say, a very scientific approach, who really understand the chemistry and the compound makeup of different mushrooms, who can really provide a lot of very just valid information, because there's been a lot of conjecture I've seen on social media in particular.
I'm sorry, I have to
Right?
laugh here
People say,
because, well, we're even seeing now they're advertising mushrooms in a gummy and saying it's a microdose because of the rising popularity of microdosing psychedelics. Now they're referring to even lion's mane in a gummy as a microdose and somehow going to help your brain as a nootropic. Frankly, I think that's like taking a placebo because the amount they're providing is so little. It's just candy. But I'm really curious to see what your perspective is on that, because people, they hear broadly something like, oh, lion's mane is great for the brain, and maybe it could even help to prevent something like this disease state of Alzheimer's. Whether or not that's a false promise, I don't want to get into that, and I'm not making any of these claims, but just to really understand what they can trust, or how they should even really think about something as an added tool for their cabinet, as opposed to what's window dressing, where's the fact, where's the fiction?
yeah, that's a great question. And I think what we feel is that we are at the very beginning stages of really understanding this kingdom. We are, as a group, as a company, very humble about what we know, and really have an understanding that there is so much we don't know. Because mycology just has not got the breadth of research that the botanical kingdom has. So if you look at the botanical kingdom, we know there are certain plants where the leaf may have the bioactivity, or the roots may have the bioactivity, or maybe it's in the flower, right? There are all different kinds of plants and parts of plants that have more or less application for health and wellness. The same applies in the fungal community. And so when you hear broad statements such as it has to be an extract or it has no value, that's a vast oversimplification. When you think of the thousands of different mushrooms, really millions, much larger kingdom than the botanical kingdom, and the fact that there are unique compounds in these different parts of the mushroom life cycle and in each of the different species. So that's the learning that we should all be striving to really understand and really, so we have formed a collective, a collaborative of the mushroom growers and the mycologists in our community. So we are all meeting and contributing to that knowledge and ongoing awareness. But I think going to the end state of a product, two most important things are, one, where is the mushroom grown? To make sure to, see, is there transparency? Is this needs to be an organic product for sure. And then
I mean, why we would even
secondly,
debate that to me is
right? That's sort of a given.
yeah.
And then secondly, what's the dosage level? Because you're right, everybody's jumping on the bandwagon right now. I mean, things that seems have gone very slowly in a way in the mycology world and now very fast, right? So now all of a sudden there's all this attention, and because of all the attention to mushrooms, a lot of new products are being launched with varying degrees, I would say, of efficacy, right? So looking at that dosage, is this a dosage? Is it, 0.25 of a gram of something that's the serving size? Very unlikely that that's going to be an efficacious dose to produce the benefit that you're looking for.
Yeah. And I will just speak as somebody who's on the other side and sometimes doing formulation. I've used lion's mane recently. And in one case, it was reasonable to use a whole powder. And in another case, it was reasonable to use an extract. And the reason for both of those things had to do with formulation, amount of the ingredient that would be required, and what we were seeking to get out of it in the end. And so I think all of those things have to be considered. But frankly, and I'm just going to say this in general terms, when it comes to something like a gummy vitamin, and I'm not going to say all of them necessarily, but generally speaking, they don't have a very high level of that particular ingredient. Now, that said, I mean, that would be a reason too to perhaps go to a higher extract that is standardized, because you can't put quite as much of the material into a gummy as you might another delivery system.
Yeah, we have, again, a very talented R&D team. And so for our own brand, we have 0.5 gram per gummy in the gummy. That took a lot of R&D, a lot of work, but we're absolutely not going to compromise on, launching something with no promise behind it.
Right.
So we
they
have
say microdose, and you're like,
yeah,
okay.
microdose. Yeah, that's maybe a key word right there, right? Yeah, but you are absolutely right. And we certainly recognize there are many products where an extract is the best application for that product, right? And as a formulator, you need to, understand what the consumer experience is going to be at the other end. Is this a solubility? We're seeing applications and potential in personal care now. So, you'd want something that is going to be highly soluble. So that's another area that we are working on right now. But importantly, that dose and understanding what is the dose for that specific species too, because I'm also seeing different companies out that have a blend of mushrooms with small amounts, and then they make claims against every single species. But generally speaking, to achieve the claim, for instance, for lion's mane around cognitive health, you need a certain dosage level of that one species, right? Again, these are just as unique as the botanical community.
Yeah, for certain. And I'm encouraged that there are more responsible brands out there too.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I think this is just a comment I would make across the board. You can formulate any number of products that are on trend and put a dusting of material in them and still be irresponsible and make claims along those lines, or you can do it right. And the products that do it right are sometimes a little more expensive. But frankly, price doesn't seem to be the dictator, because I've seen all sorts of products on Amazon that make all the claims and that are relatively high price, capitalizing on the present trend. So you're going to have to dig a little deeper. You're going to have to read your labels and taking a few key examples of responsible brands can help you to select something that's going to work for you and deliver the thing that you hope it will, as opposed to just be something you're taking mindlessly. That said, I don't think we can get too little of these. Well, I think we can get too little of these mushrooms, but if you are going to consume something like lion's mane consistently with time, that's really what shows its benefit, seeing that it's taken consistently. I consume lion's mane as a fresh mushroom too. So I wonder what your thoughts are on that as a culinary treat, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the one thing that, we need to point out is you need to cook your raw mushrooms, right? So when you're buying a culinary mushroom, it's not grown in a sterile environment. So you do need to take care to clean and then cook the mushroom to make sure that, you're getting rid of any bacteria or anything on it. But of course, it has the attributes in it as well. And I mean, I love to go to the produce areas now and see how much they have expanded the different types of mushrooms that are, and of course, at farmers markets, you can find pink oysters and just all different kinds of mushrooms now. When you think 10 years ago, it was a button mushroom and then the shiitake mushroom came along and that was big news. So now people can find different ways to use mushrooms as a meat replacement. We've been active, with the Mushroom Council. The Mushroom Council's really made a lot of efforts over the years to help encourage people to use mushrooms either in combination with meats to reduce the amount of meat or just as a straight across meat replacement. And so they've had a lot of success, I think, in that effort in helping with the education of finding different sources of protein as well.
Yeah, I have to mention a story here, and this may help people get kind of an understanding of where we're headed. I got to spend last Friday with June Jolie, who's a food ethnographer, and she was one of the keynote panelists at Expo West. So I met her after her presentation specifically on how Generation Z or Generation Alpha are essentially engaging with food, the post millennial generation, the people who came of age during COVID, right? So we meet up in San Francisco and we go by this little shop that's over at Pier 1. And you notice that they have all these beautiful wild crafted mushrooms. So we bought their first harvest from Oregon, wild crafted morel mushrooms, took them back to her place, and she grilled them up in just a simple sauce of oil and herbs and a little bit of spice. Because morels have like these little pockets within them, she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, they're a little gritty because you just couldn't quite brush all of the little bits out of the wild." So that would be one of the reasons that you want to make sure that you're cooking these things because there could be other bacteria in the soil that's coming along with it. And I will say the texture, the taste, everything, I mean, they were divine. And considering that I have recently shifted to being a vegetarian myself, I'm looking for other creative ways to get these nutrients into my diet. I did not know I would have to cook lion's mane. I thought I could eat that raw, and I have eaten quite a bit of it raw recently. So I'm curious if you think I might have put myself at risk with that.
Well, you would know already, I think. Yeah. I think it's just a good rule of thumb, good precautionary. I mean, if you're growing it yourself or, and you know where it's coming from and how it's being handled, that's one thing. But if you're not 100% sure what the substrate was that it was grown on, it's just oftentimes when people say they have allergies to mushrooms, it's more related to that substrate that it was grown on and the allergy to the substrate itself.
Yeah, that's incredible. Okay. Well, my little excursion into the culinary delights of mushrooms will be paused for now. I'm curious to know what's coming next for your business and the things that you're working on, perhaps on the research end, to help bring more great information to all of us who are trying to divine how these mushrooms should be really used and ultimately deepen our understanding. And for historical context for people, when I started working in this industry 25 years ago, selling mushroom extracts, we were focused on one thing, full spectrum and standardized at the same time. We're using aqueous, like tea like methods of essentially brewing that herb and then working to capture as much of its essence before spraying it dry so that it could then be used in other applications. One of the challenges we were posed with is a lot of times this would create something that was very hygroscopic, meaning it would attract water and have a difficult workability for that reason. Now, with advances in technology and understanding, we know in some cases mycelium is better for this, the fruiting body is better for that. And it enables us to get a little smarter about how we're growing and how we're extracting these particular ingredients for use, as whether it be for culinary or for beyond into this medicinal applications.
Yeah, I think exactly what you're saying is the journey that we have been on. So looking at even the test methods, starting at that level, we have a lot of challenges finding commercial labs that can very reliably and validly repeat a measurement and get consistent results. And so if you don't have that to start out with, then it's very hard to do research, right? Because you don't know what you're measuring against and to see improvement. So again, with this coalition of other interested mycologists and growers and brands, we are teaming up together with labs to help develop good, reliable methods so that we encourage commercial labs to have those readily available for formulators who can retest and get the same results back again. We're looking to really understand the different compounds in the different species of mushrooms and where we find them in the fruit body, in the mycelial stage. And then also, after we harvest the mushroom, then how do we process the mushroom? Because heat can play a role both positively and negatively on different compounds. So we do see that heat can harm nootropic compounds at very high levels. So there's sort of a band within which you want to process lion's mane in particular. On the other hand, heat can help make available beta glucan compounds, right? By loosening that chitinous cell wall. So again, that processing portion of how you're handling these great, wonderful, different species of mushrooms is also something that will relate to how much bioavailability is present in that final product itself. And then now looking at applied research is also a very exciting area for us to be in. So we're looking at clinicals on our lion's mane with end measurements of depression and mood and cognitive improvement. And we're seeing great results, particularly in younger cohorts who tend to really struggle with anxiety and depression and so on. So we're really very, very excited about that. We've been involved in sports performance research, looking at max VO2, which is a measurement of endurance. And so with our Cordyceps is a mushroom that helps with availability of oxygen. It's such a very simple concept, right? More oxygen, more capability of your muscles to produce oxygen or energy rather in the presence of oxygen. So aerobic endurance. So we've seen great results there. And now we have great cell results on the immune front, but now looking at prebiotic models to establish the gut health, the microbiome relationship. Again, this is all important as it relates to the type of mushroom species. So we're looking at a number of different species, and we're looking at different dosages as well. So we can provide really great guidance to consumers and to formulators about if this is the claim that we want to be able to attach to this species, you need to have this amount of mushroom in your product to have that final claim. So
So
it's
ultimately,
pretty.
you're talking about building responsible products. But I think it's also just really interesting the time that we're in, because especially here where I am in California, microdosing specifically with psychedelics is very popular. And while it's still of questionable legality, I mean, I'm even seeing websites selling psychedelics. So I'm very curious where you sit when it comes to something like these newer advents in treatment, because many are saying that these psychedelic mushrooms taken at microdoses, where you aren't going to experience the psychotropic effects of the mushroom, can actually support building different pathways within our brain so we can overcome things like post traumatic stress. Where do you sit on this? Do you support the use of psychedelics, or do you speak on that?
I mean, I'm certainly part of a lot of discussions on psychedelics and the application for them. And it's interesting, as you say, in California, I rarely go to a meeting now where someone doesn't turn to me and say, I microdose every single day. And, are you growing psychedelics? And I have to remind people, it's not legal. And, you're not going to see psychedelics on the Whole Foods shelves in the next little while. I think what has happened in the research related to PTSD, related to depression, and related to addiction is truly remarkable. Those are all areas where pharmaceuticals have not made a lot of progress, very sadly, right? Over when you look at rates of suicide, when you look at addiction issues in our country, this is, I think, a really important discovery that, kind of got halted for many, many years. That research relates to high doses of mushrooms, of the psilocybin mushrooms that are being delivered in a clinical setting. There's a lot of screening that happens before that. You have, professionals who are guiding you through that experience. And it is absolutely a wonderful application and solution for many, many people. On the other end of that spectrum, though, is microdosing. So a lot of people microdose small amounts of mushrooms. And yes, you're right. You see it on Amazon, all kinds of places, websites. And they report having more clarity and more focus, is generally what I hear from people who are microdosing. I think that could be true. I think there's a lot more science that needs to occur on consistent use of microdose over time. So that's something that has not been well documented. So some important research that needs to occur. The other thing that, of course, this is not a regulated, our products are very highly, highly regulated, as you know, right? We have a big team of quality and regulatory specialists here. And so when you're buying a chocolate bar from someone and it's not regulated, how do you know how much is in there? How do you know the quality of the material in there? And so, again, this is a really emerging area. And so I think, there may be some very positive outcomes for people, but there also is potential for negative outcomes. And so I think that it's a little bit of the Wild West. I think it's great to see the awareness of mushrooms, but I think I would like to see the research catch up to that interest so we can provide guidance to consumers.
So I would say the same thing exists in the world of CBD, right? So when we're talking about things like medicinal use of cannabidiols that are present in hemp plants, the claims outpace the research. And so we get to this space where I think part of the rising popularity of mushrooms as a whole is also because of the rising popularity of this concept of microdosing, because people then start to gravitate to, oh, wait, this is becoming mainstream. I can talk about tripping now. Is that like okay? Because many of us, and I will include myself in this bin, experimented with magic mushrooms in our earlier years or in college, or have been on a medicine journey of some way, like whether it be ayahuasca or medicinal mushrooms, in a controlled environment with someone that's supporting your journey. This has become very popular now, and I think that level of acceptance has also broadened people's minds to think about all of the mushrooms in the kingdom. I've also heard Paul Stamets isn't really a fan of portobello mushrooms, and I'm very curious about your thoughts of the mushrooms that are available on our grocery store shelves. Tool or something we should avoid? Where do you stand on that?
Well, again, making sure that I know some of his concern is about the safety related to allergens, for instance, that can be a part of portobellos. And that goes to this issue of cleaning and cooking. So, when you look at how some of these mushrooms are grown, it's not in a pristine environment by any means. And so you really need to take care. When I think back many years ago, right, we always had raw mushrooms on a salad bar. No, that probably wasn't a great idea. So I think having the availability of different mushrooms really helps educate and help people think about utilization of mushrooms in different ways. They will all have beta glucans, and as you mentioned, they'll have vitamin D if they've been in an exposed area to light. But again, it's sort of how you're going to ultimately handle them that will be the concern there.
Wonderful. Well, it's springtime here. And I will say the chanterelle mushrooms in my neighborhood are going off because we've had so much rain. And so I plan to harvest some. Is there anything we should be aware of when we wild harvest mushrooms that we know we've identified it properly?
Well, that's the important one. Steve Farrar, our wonderful co-founder, says all mushrooms are edible, but some only once.
That's right.
Right?
And it may not be the trippy journey that you imagine you might go on. It could be
on the
something
other one.
far worse.
Yeah, a last trip. So, yes. So if you've identified you're very comfortable, then again, making sure you're cleaning them and handling them appropriately. And isn't it a wonderful thing that you can now expand your sort of culinary horizons? At one of the Golden Globes dinners, I think this is 2 years ago, they served king trumpet mushroom, which has a very large stem. It looked like a scallop dish. It was so beautiful and creative. I saw photos of it. And so people are thinking differently about mushrooms and how they can incorporate them in their cooking regimes.
Oh, I love that. When I had these beautiful morel mushrooms. Now, I grew up in Southern Oregon and I never had them when I lived there. I think I thought they were poisonous when I saw them in the forest, right? And now I got to experience them. The texture, it reminded me of octopus taco. I haven't had octopus in years because as soon as I started scuba diving and realized how cool these little critters are underwater, I just couldn't imagine eating them anymore. And I also just felt like they didn't have a ton of flavor, and they take on the flavor of whatever you put them in, which is very similar, I think, to some of these mushrooms. Like they might be kind of innocuous, but provide that texture or something similar to it if that's something that you're looking for, and you're also going more plant-based, then mushrooms can really help with that. Protein, adding more protein to your diet. A lot of them actually have a fair amount of protein. Also, polysaccharides, which is part of the reason some of those extracts can be so hygroscopic and just attract water. The polysaccharides are incredible antioxidants, and they are so health supportive that even if you don't like mushrooms, like eating them, maybe find a supplement and they can go to you at Mushroom Superfood for that just fine too, right?
Yeah, we did some analysis of antioxidants in our mushrooms. And for several of the species, reishi, turkey tail, and Agaricus blazei, It was higher than a standardized blueberry extract, which shocked us. I
So if
mean,
you
we
look at the
know,
ORAC value, the actual ORAC value was higher.
yeah. I mean, it was just absolutely amazing. So this is where this humility has really set into our, that's where we kind of come from. It's just, let's be open-minded and try to seek to understand more and more about this incredible kingdom. But that isn't that great news, because usually you associate antioxidants with very colorful fruits and vegetables, right? That's why you want a colorful plate, right? Mushrooms aren't usually colorful, the exception being Cordyceps militaris, that's very bright orange. So, but no, reishi and turkey tail and agaricus blazei, incredible amounts of antioxidants. So we're going to go down a wonderful path now, looking to discover more about those antioxidants.
Yeah, and I mean, while reishi and turkey tail can be a little bitter, I think they're fairly simple to disguise. Like you can put them in a capsule, or you can actually blend them into a smoothie just fine too.
Yeah, likewise, even chaga, right, which is a sort of a woody, very dark mushroom. I describe many of these mushrooms as being chameleon-like, just to your point, that they take on the flavor of whatever you formulate them with. So yeah, they're very, very available in terms of something that you can disguise in with different other ingredients.
Yeah. Well, I could talk to you for hours about all of this, but I think we'll have to call it another conversation for another day. In the meantime, I want to be sure that people know that they can come to you directly. I will be sure to include links to everywhere they can find you and Om Mushroom Organics. Om Mushroom Superfood with our show notes. But I didn't know if you'd want to give them a coupon code or anything like that they can explore your website with.
I'm sorry, I don't have one, but I am going to send you one. And so we can put maybe a link on your
Yeah, we'll
podcast.
put it
I'd love
directly
to
in
do
show
that.
notes so people can go ahead and grab that and explore the variety of products that you offer, see if there's something that fits for you that you want to try out. And frankly, again, it's like I have tried so many mushroom products out there. I think the variety you offer is exceptional. And I know that you're working to make your packaging more responsible as time goes on too. So I know I bang that drum often here, like, let's try to reduce plastic. But this is a journey for most companies too. Like they're working to solve these big problems as well. Thank you
It
so much for
is.
joining me
And
today.
so this is oh, thank you. I was just going to finish with the best product for you is the one that you will take every day, right? That's being consistent with a product is likely the most important part of it, because if it's sitting in your cupboard, it's not doing a lot of good for you. So yes, we're very happy. We have a lot of variety in our different product offerings.
This is why I have a daily shake habit. And I'm just going to share this with the world because I'll tell you, I have a cabinet of supplements, but I will not remember to take them if I don't have my shake. And I also, some of the supplements that I take are in powder form. So I just toss them in and it makes my life really easy. I love a ceremonial green tea, like a matcha, right? And I know it's really health promoting for me. And I want to be sure I drink it every day, but I don't make time to drink it every day. So I have a green tea matcha powder that I just add to whatever smoothie I'm making. And that gives me all of the benefits of that really high quality green tea, which I may or may not have made time to drink that day, in addition to any of the supplements I'm taking. And then the added benefit of that is that I'm blending it with all these berries, which are super health promoting. And any pills I'm taking, and frankly, I do more and more in powders, so less and less in pills. Because of that, they're just super easy to swallow. They go right down because you got a thick shake that you're doing with it. And the way I make my shakes are delicious. It's a treat for me. And it's a way to get in all these valuable antioxidants. I put nuts in them. I like to put walnuts. I put chia seeds. So again, I'm getting these superfoods along with it and plant-based omegas. I mean, all these things are going to benefit me. And then one more tip for people, because I was recently told by a dear friend in the industry a long time that I saved him minutes a day and a whole lot of pain. Now, I put this on TikTok as well. Even if you're just taking your pills with water, just when you go to take them, put them in your mouth, kind of toss your head back to put the pills in the back of your mouth. And then when you sip your water, or water, shake, whatever, point your chin down a little bit to swallow. And you can take 5, 6 pills at the same time. They'll go right down. Because if you're trying to lean up to swallow, that closes your esophagus. So you have a harder time swallowing pills. But that's our instinct to do it that way when we never eat that way in real life. So take your supplements, something like a mushroom you do need every day, and something like lion's mane in particular. I know it's really popular, but you're not going to see the benefit of it unless you take it consistently. That's the case with a lot of these things. Like if you're not going to be consistent, it won't work. So you're essentially throwing your money away.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice, Corinna.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining me today. I would love to have you back as you produce more research so we can talk more deeply on a particular mushroom, perhaps, or a particular endeavor that you're undertaking.
I would love to anytime. Love to stay in touch.
To find out more about Dr. Sandra Carter and her work with M2 mushroom ingredients and the consumer brand Om Mushroom Superfood, visit the links that we provide in show notes and in our expanded blog at caremorebebetter.com. As we mentioned, you will also get an added bonus discount, and I'll be sure to include that link with show notes. You can find these resources and so much more when you come to our website, so visit caremorebebetter.com. Sign up for our newsletter. We send 1 email a week, and additional resources come in every one, including great books that we suggest that you read from our past guests on the show, resources so that you can live a little more sustainably every day, and direct links to past episodes that are relevant to today's conversation. Thank you now and always for being a part of this pod and this community, because together we really can do so much more. We can care more. We can be better. We can even improve our connections to one another and create a new, healthier environment, just like the mushrooms do. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for social good. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and share with your friends to help us reach more people and spread more social good.